Hello, BookTube. I'm trying a different camera here and a different setup just to see how well or how poorly it works. And that means that this video is in the nature of an experiment. And yet, despite the fact that it's an experiment, I'm going to do something in it that I can't undo. So I'm going to do a mail haul. You can't redo a mail haul. I can hold up the books, but the thrill of opening the packages only happens once. So we'll just live dangerously and see what happens. Of course, the first item in the mail is not a package, it's a periodical. It's the TLS, the London Times Literary Supplement, the greatest literary journal in the English-speaking world. And although there's nothing quite interesting happening in the letters column this time around, the issue is still fascinating for me because it includes a number of books that I have either reviewed or commissioned others to review, and that sets the butterflies in the stomach going, wondering. You always wonder in a situation like that, especially for a venue as high profile as the TLS, whether or not their reviewer is going to catch something that either you or your reviewer didn't catch, or whether their review is going to do just a much, much better job. They have a review here of a whole world collection of letters letters from James Merrill, the American poet James Merrill. I reviewed that, and the review in here is. Who wrote it? I should probably tell you that. Yes. The review here is by Heather Cass White, and she loved the book, same as I did. She comes to a different ultimate conclusion than I did. I loved the book and also ended up thinking, who on earth would buy this? How could this possibly be of interest to more than 15 people? Because it's just Merrill's letters. It's not. None of the accompanying letters are there. There's very little in the way of a storytelling narrative concept that's given, so you don't know a lot about the letters that you're reading. Heather Cass White comes to the opposite conclusion. She wishes that the volume were twice as long. She clearly loved it as much as I did, but she, I guess, either isn't thinking about the general reader or is thinking, maybe rightly, that the general reader won't have any interest in the book. I couldn't help but think that way because it was a new hardcover with a dust jacket and a normal popular price from a normal mainstream commercial publisher. So I had to think the whole time I was reading it of you, of the general reader. I had to think, well, would anybody who doesn't know all about James Merrill be interested in this volume? And I couldn't see a whole lot of that, and I'm not sure that that's anything that the editors of the volume could have done anything about. But the other thing in here, the big thing, there are two translations. There's a combined review of two new translations of Virgil's Aeneid. I don't think I've seen either one of those translations. So I need to double check, but I need to get them if I haven't seen them, because I definitely want to read them, whether I review them or not. But there's also in here a bigger review by Charles King of Doom, the new book by Neil Ferguson about all the catastrophes of the 20th century. Or of the year 2020, but then looking back at a whole bunch of earlier catastrophes and the ways that humans react to them and learn from them. And I commissioned a review for that in Georgia. In northern Georgia, there lurks a small print newspaper, Big Canoe News. Comes out once a month in glorious full color, great big lump of a thing. And at the back of the news section of Big Canoe News every month is a very generous, very nice, full-color, totally original 2-page spread of books coverage. And starting in 2020, I have become their books editor. I'm the guy in charge of that section. And it is a blast, an absolute blast. I could wish for an audience 10 times my size. I leave a link to Big Canoe down below in every video. Feel free to go and look. The newspaper does not paywall anything. So you can look at the whole of the book section without costing you a penny. And in that, if you take that route, well, then Big Canoe will know about traffic. They'll know if there's an uptick in traffic, and that's good. That helps with just about everything. And if you want the tactile experience, if you want this print newspaper with yours truly in charge of the book section, at least a small corner of the English language book coverage out there in the world now belongs to me, now is directed by me. And my goal has been to make it competitive, believe it or not. This is a free, tiny print newspaper in northern Georgia. And yet my goal is to make it competitive given scale with any book section anywhere in the English speaking world. We cover new releases. We have a couple of good columns, one new column every month, plus a handful of book new releases in review. The pattern that I'm tentatively going for now is that every issue will have a column. Every other month I have a mystery column. The other months I write a column about new releases in that month, and just talk about them a bit. My plan is to have every issue have a column, and then a longer review, one review that's longer than the others, and then a smattering of smaller but still punchy reviews of new releases, things you're going to see in your bookstore. And it's like I said, it's a tremendous amount of fun. And if you want the tactile experience of actually opening the newspaper, Big Canoe is actually a very good example of what used to be very common in the United States: small town newspapers, just trying hard to punch above their weight. They have a great graphics design team, so the thing looks beautiful. They're all advertising supported, and their individual sections make good reading. This is not just hog futures. This is our local news. There is plenty of local news, and maybe some hog futures. I haven't actually scrutinized those sections, but there's also other writing, editorial, other reviews, news analysis, things like that are very good. It's a very good example of a small town newspaper. A lot of other small town newspapers, including a lot of small town newspapers that still exist, not many of them do, but a lot of small town newspapers that still exist could learn a lot from Big Canoe in terms of at least what it looks like. And if you want that tactile sensation, if you follow the link on my videos, you will see a way to subscribe. Feel free to subscribe. I think it's $30 a year. You get one issue a month, and they are big and boisterous. And the book section, well, it's worth reading. If I do say so myself. And I ran a review in my book section of this book, Doom, by Neil Ferguson. And the review that I ran was negative. The reviewer talked about a lot of the catastrophes that Ferguson talks about, but her verdict on the book was that it was just so much hot air, and wasn't really much in the way of history at all. Sort of maybe a little bit surprising for those of you who are accustomed to some kinds of local small town newspapers. But that is the way that it's going to be in my book section as long as I'm in control of it. We will have negative reviews of big releases if they warrant it. I'm going to try to get reviews of the biggest releases. Doom is a huge release in the nonfiction world of the American book market this month. And if my reviewer doesn't like it, I am not... There are two different philosophies here for book section editors. One is to bury a bad book in silence. I've had many editors who followed this philosophy. I have some right now who follow this philosophy, where they say, if the book isn't good, I'm not going to waste the space talking about how it isn't good. Instead, we just won't talk about it at all. We'll move straight on to books that are good. I'd rather sing the praises of books that are good with my limited space than criticize the ones that aren't. And that's a totally valid approach to being a book section editor. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The other approach is to pick the releases that you want to cover and make that the extent of the remit of your reach as the book section editor. I will pick the books I want covered, and I want them covered intelligently, and I want the reviews written well. I want the reviews to be entertaining for you to read, regardless of the book. A key element that so many book reviewers and even some book section editors forget, which is that these aren't book reports. Book reviewing is a kind of writing on its own. It has to be enjoyable for you to read on its own, whether you're interested in the book under review or not, whether you plan on reading or buying the book under review or not. You should be entertained by the review itself. I want that. I want the book reviews to be smart, and I want them to be good reading. And I am not extending my remit as a book section editor a single inch further than that. If the reviewer takes the book that I want covered in my section and hates it, then we can run a negative review. And that Doom review was courteous but negative. And I was naturally curious to see what Charles King would make of this same book in the TLS. And when you dig around, after he's finished throat clearing, he gets to Doom is savvy and endlessly entertaining, and if it reads more like a compendium than a treatise, this is because the book follows the rules of Olympian history writing. The formula involves asserting a claim or posting a framework of analysis, and then offering not an argument but a stream of examples. The approach is to use history without actually being it. That is, to avoid offering propositions amenable to scrutiny, contradiction, or falsification. As a school, it is not Whiggish, Marxist, or liberal, but mesmerist. Historians do other things besides make arguments, of course. They evoke, compare, and bear witness. But when the object is to persuade, one wants to know which way the data actually point. What of Doom's central idea, that disaster is what we make of it? The claim is, of course, right. What in life isn't what we make of it? But the evidence that would have deepened this insight is largely missing from Ferguson's account. Some sense of the thoughts, feelings, and practical responses of people directly affected by large-scale tragedy. In its engagement with awfulness, Doom is more actuarial than visceral. Yet a key element of good anti-Doom design may reside in our frail, emotional, overwrought selves. So I thought that King's review was a little overwritten. It sort of matched Doom in that tone. But that is a serious knock against the book. As courteous as you're being, that is a serious knock against the book. That's you saying this isn't really history. And I'm sure that Neil Ferguson thinks that it is, or at least talks about it like it is. I'm sure that if the old book flinging lecture circuit still existed, or will come back to existing, that's what he would say. He would say this is a work of history, and that is now at least 2 reviews I know of that are claiming just sort of matter-of-factly that it's not, or that if it is, it's a worthless kind of history, which I think is kind of interesting. We'll have to see if that book chat circuit actually revives. I was kind of amazed yesterday to see the news that the CDC here in the United States has declared that fully vaccinated people need not wear their masks, except in a handful of very specific circumstances. Don't need to wear it outside. Don't need to wear it inside. Don't need to do anything like that if you are fully vaccinated. Now, of course, that's the CDC, and that's a guideline. So local businesses can say, well, I don't want to be carding people at the door with their vaccination cards. I don't want to be running the risk of anything like that. So we're still going to require you to wear face masks when you come in here. I imagine a lot of businesses will still require face masks. And online, it looked to me yesterday like a lot of people just didn't know how to react to that news. It seemed to them to be artificial, whimsical. I saw so many people on so many different platforms wondering what the facts are, what the science is behind this. How can you tell us for a year and a half to wear a mask everywhere we go, and then tell us overnight no? And that's interesting to me. I don't do much, so I haven't actually put it to the test. Naturally, the main practical application that it has for me is dog walks, is taking Frida outside. According to these CDC guidelines that I read yesterday, I no longer need to wear a mask when I walk Frida out on sidewalks, out in the up on the hill or in the park. According to those guidelines, I no longer need to do that. And yet I wonder what that would feel like after all this time. And I wonder what kind of reaction I'd get. I guess I'll try it and find out. I can put a mask in my pocket just in case I need one. I'd much rather not wear one, of course, on a beautiful day with the aromas of the natural world filling the air. But we shall see. One way or another, for the CDC to say that when the United States still has barely a third of its population vaccinated, seems to me to be either totally foolhardy and something that we will pay for with another surge, or a sign that maybe things are going to go back to normal more abruptly than I expected. I guess maybe it was always going to feel abrupt. But one way or another, I thought that was fascinating. But anyway, we have packages to do here. I have 2 packages. We'll see what they are. What is this first one? Oh no, it's another New York Review of Books volume. The New York Review of Books does a reprint series that is quite enterprising. Most of their picks, just editorially, I don't like at all. Most of them I just They're not anything that I'm interested in at all. Every once in a while, they hit one right out of the park. I have a few of them here. And I guess I must be on a list of theirs because I'm getting more than I'm missing now. This next one is The Dead Girls Class Trip. Selected stories by Anna Seegers with an introduction by Ingo Schultz. See, and that is the colophon there. This is I don't know that I know this author though. Her long and productive career reflected and commented on periods in German history that defined the 20th century. Her novel Revolt of the Fishermen won the Kleist Prize. Okay. And is a literary product of the new objectivity movement characteristic of the Weimar period. In 1939, she wrote the anti-fascist The Seventh Cross. It is considered the first representation and exposure of German concentration camps. So she wrote Transit, and now The Dead Girls Class Trip is the first collection of this author's short stories from throughout her career, an overview of a writer whose work is inextricably linked to the politics and tragedy of her time, yet remains an artist of continued relevance. Okay, so is this a collection that existed before? Oh, okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. Originally, it looks like, originally there were 3 volumes of her short stories. One collecting stories from 1924 to 1932, one from 1933 to 1947, and one from 1958 to 1966 that were published in German. And this volume, I guess, draws from those with translations by Margot Bettar-Dembo. Okay, so I'm going to have to see, maybe there's a translator's note in here to tell me, or maybe the introduction will tell me what the rationale was for picking stories. But one way or another, this is an author I know barely at all. So I'm going to be curious. This comes out in mid-June, and it will be this. It will be the standard New York Review of Books or paperback. But I'm going to have to find out, naturally, if I'm going to write about this, I'm going to want to know what it is. Like, for instance, did this collection of her short stories, drawn from those 3 larger volumes, come out in a German edition first? Is this a translation of someone else's curation of that lifetime of short stories? Or is this a new work? Not only a new English translation, but a new anthology. I'm going to want to know that. That's going to be fascinating. Okay, so that's the first book. And now we'll move on to the second one. I almost hesitate to say this because you don't like to hear it, but I got some books yesterday and actually filmed a video. And it was unusable. It was just a ranty, unusable video. So I have those books. I should have thought, if I'd have thought of, I would have worked them into this video to show you them. But I will. I'll work them into the next one. Oh my. Okay. Okay, this is an advanced copy. This comes out in mid-September. This is by Samuel Moyne, and it's called Humane: How the United States Abandoned Peace and Reinvented War. Oh my, this isn't going to be easy, is it? This is going to be a $30 hardcover coming out from Farrar, Straus & Giroux in September. And Samuel Moyne's name rings a bell. He is a Henry Luce Professor of Jurisprudence at Yale Law School and Professor of History at Yale University. His books include Not Enough, Human Rights in an Unequal World, but they just include that. They don't. That's not all of them. I swear I know this guy's name. Maybe I know him from book reviewing. Let's see here. In the years since 9/11, we have entered an age of endless war. With little debate or discussion, the United States carries out military operations around the globe. It hardly matters who's president or whether liberals or conservatives operate the levers of power. The United States exercises dominion everywhere. In this book, the author asks a troubling but urgent question. What if efforts to make war more ethical, to ban torture and limit civilian casualties, have only shored up the military enterprise and made it sturdier? To advance this case, the author looks back at a century and a half of passionate arguments about the ethics of using force. In the 19th century, the founders of the Red Cross struggled mightily to make war less lethal, even as they acknowledged its inevitability. Tolstoy prominently opposed their efforts, reasoning that war needed to be abolished, not reformed. And over the subsequent century, a popular movement to abolish war flourished in both sides of the Atlantic. Eventually, however, reformers shifted their attention from opposing the crime of war to opposing war crimes, with fateful consequences. The ramifications of this shift became apparent in the post-9/11 era. By that time, the U.S. military had embraced the agenda of humane war, driven both by the availability of precision weaponry and the need to protect its image. The battle shifted from the streets to the courtroom, where the tactics of the war on terror were litigated, but its foundational assumptions went without serious challenge. These trends only accelerated during the Obama and Trump presidencies. Even as the two administrations spoke of American power and morality in radically different tones, they ushered in the second decade of the Forever War. Humane is the story of how America went off to fight and never came back. Good Lord. And how armed combat was transformed from an imperfect tool for resolving disputes into an integral component of the modern condition. Oh, this is going to be rough to read. Especially since I know I've read this author before, and I associate with this author a great degree of probity, a great degree of intelligence. So this is not going to be an easily swattable book. You know, a book with that uncomfortable a premise, I'm naturally going to want to swat. And I don't think it's going to be possible. There's no arguing with a lot of the things that I just read you. And that makes it rough. Oh my, that makes it rough. And here you have the cover is actually well chosen, because the background is just, you know, a bare chaparral, but the symbols indicate drone warfare, which is a big, I would imagine it's going to play a huge role in this book. The more you can depersonalize, the more you can take, you know, the casualties, the pine boxes, the Arlington Cemetery, the more you can take that out, the more you can keep this going. This is going to be this is going to be rough to read. I will get to this later. I'm not going to do it right away because it's still some time from now, but it's going to be rough when it comes up. I hope it gets reviewed widely. But there you go. Those are our 2 books for today. There were a handful of books yesterday. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't hold them up in front of the bean, should I? The last thing in the world you want. I will work to yesterday's books into some later video. But for now, I'm going to wrap this up. This is an experiment. I don't know how this camera is handling light or sound. I don't know. Also, key component, whether or not YouTube is going to recognize that this is a video it can grab. And the upload process is the other equation here. But I'm not going to make any more videos, so I'm going to try this one. So I'm going to wrap it up, and if you see it, then it succeeded. Thank you, BookTube.